Why do the enlightened ones refuse to explain things to the end? Absolute wisdom cannot be expressed in words, not because enlightened beings wish to conceal anything, but because language itself is incapable of containing it. Whatever is put into words becomes a distorted version of the truth. Words are merely tools, but when used to describe something that lies beyond ordinary comprehension, it is like trying to scoop the entire ocean with a small cup. Human thought is limited by the very system of language it uses. When we speak of something, we employ pre-existing concepts, yet supreme wisdom is not a concept. It is a living reality that cannot be framed within any system of thought. The moment we assign a name to it, it becomes something else, something that can be defined, misunderstood, or interpreted in countless ways. This is why those who have attained awakening often avoid answering metaphysical questions directly. Take the example of the Buddha. When asked about the cosmos, about existence after death, or about the absolute nature of reality, he chose silence, not because he lacked knowledge, but because any answer would create wrongful attachment. If he had said there is existence after death, people would cling to that as absolute truth, while reality transcends every concept of existence or non-existence. If he had said there is nothing after death, they would fall into nihilism, which is not the truth either. Language always traps people in duality, whereas absolute wisdom lies beyond such division. Those who have realized this understand that any attempt to convey it in words will only lead listeners to interpret through their own preconceptions, not according to the true nature of truth. Each person possesses a unique database of life experiences, and when they hear something, they automatically interpret it through what they already know. But ultimate truth cannot be accessed in that way. If someone lacks the necessary experience, they will only grasp a tiny fragment of the truth, or worse, misunderstand it completely. That is why the great sages in history tended to teach indirectly. They did not provide straightforward answers but guided their students so that they might discover the answer through their own experience. When truth is realized directly, it ceases to be a concept and becomes a living reality that transcends all our words. The human brain is not designed to perceive ultimate reality directly. From birth, we are programmed to think in patterns, using causal logic to explain the world. But absolute wisdom does not operate that way. It has no beginning, no end, and is not bound by time or space. Human thought always relies on distinctions and definitions. The Dunning-Kruger effect clearly shows how people misunderstand wisdom. Those who know little often think they understand everything, while those who reach a high level of understanding become ever more aware of the limitations of thought. This explains why true masters, the more enlightened they become, speak less or even refuse to explain directly. They cannot convey absolute wisdom in words, because listeners can only receive it at a certain level, and in many cases that level is completely distorted. The human brain operates linearly, always seeking cause and effect, and trying to impose order on the world. A person might ask, where do we go after death? But that question already assumes there must be a place after death, while the concept of going only makes sense in the three-dimensional space we inhabit. When enlightened ones refuse to answer, it is not because they do not know, but because any answer will be misunderstood through the lens of limited human thought. It is like explaining color to someone born blind. You might describe red as hot and blue as cold, but no matter how you try, that person can never truly understand the essence of color. They will only relate it to sensations they already know, heat and cold, while the true nature of color remains beyond their perception. Similarly, when enlightened ones attempt to speak of ultimate reality, listeners will only understand it according to their prior experiences, which are almost always distorted. That is why many people feel confused or even reject concepts like no self, timelessness, or non-duality. Clearly, the brain is not programmed to accept these truths naturally. It always seeks stability and clarity, whereas absolute wisdom is the dissolution of all definitions. Therefore, if someone is not ready cognitively, they will not understand what enlightened ones are trying to convey, even if it is explained as clearly as possible. For this reason, enlightened beings choose silence or guide students toward a state where they can realize truth for themselves. Only in direct experience can one truly understand. When Bodhidharma, the founding master of Zen, arrived in China, he did not deliver long discourses nor try to persuade anyone of the truth. He simply sat facing a wall in meditation for 9 years without uttering a word. Those around him did not understand. They looked at him with suspicion and even thought him mad. Yet those with sufficient affinity recognized that he was teaching not with words, but with the absolute presence of his being. 9 years of wall facing was not meaningless silence, but the strongest message. Truth cannot be expressed in words, cannot be framed in thought or concept. It can only be seen directly in the profound stillness of consciousness. If you are still searching outwardly, still needing someone to explain, it means you are not yet ready. True wisdom does not come from books or teachings, but only arises in absolute inner awakening. Another story tells of a meditator who asked his master about ultimate truth. Instead of answering, the master only smiled. The student continued asking day after day, but only received a smile or silence. His patience ran out and his mind filled with doubt. Did the master not know the answer, or was he testing him? Then one day, when his mind completely let go of doubt and he no longer expected an answer from outside, he suddenly awakened. In that moment when he ceased seeking, he realized that the answer had never been in words. It had always been there in the master's silence, and in that silent moment when there were no questions and no desires. That is the nature of true wisdom. Once it is realized, every question becomes meaningless. Jitta Krishnamurti, one of the great enlightened ones of the 20th century, was expected to become the spiritual leader of a large organization with thousands ready to follow him as their teacher. But in 1929, he shocked the world by dissolving his organization, renouncing all titles, all teaching systems, and declaring openly, "Truth is a pathless land. You cannot approach it by any path whatsoever." He rejected all forms of teaching and tradition not because he denied truth, but because he understood a vital fact. When people cling to any doctrine, they turn it into a belief system. Instead of experiencing reality for themselves, they no longer truly seek truth but only look for a creed to cling to. Truth cannot be framed in any system, cannot be imitated or followed as a predetermined route. If a path is laid out, people will go along it mechanically, but that is not awakening, it is unconscious obedience. That is why Krishnamurti would not accept disciples, did not allow anyone to follow him, and did not build a religion. He would not let anyone turn his words into a doctrine. He forced people to find their own path, because if you truly wish to see truth, you cannot walk in another's footsteps. You must walk on your own. All these stories point to one thing. Wisdom does not lie in words, but in silent awareness. If someone still seeks answers through thinking, they will only receive concepts already distorted by dualistic thought. So how can a learner awaken on their own? If absolute wisdom cannot be conveyed in words and masters refuse to explain fully, what must a learner do to discover truth for themselves? Stop seeking a ready-made answer. That is the first thing a learner must recognize. If you approach an enlightened one hoping to hear a final truth, an absolute answer, you are on the wrong path from the start. Anything that can be expressed in words is not the real truth. Every answer, no matter how perfect it seems, is only a tiny fragment of reality, and if you cling to it, you imprison yourself within a mental framework, a belief system that will never truly touch reality. The great enlightened ones do not establish doctrines or build belief systems for others to follow. They know that anything put into words will become an obstacle, because when people cling to an idea, they stop exploring and only repeat. True liberation arises when one lets go of every question, when one no longer craves an answer from outside, and confronts oneself directly without any explanation. Only then will truth reveal itself, not as a concept, but as a living reality beyond all words. Therefore, if any piece of knowledge makes you feel confined, if any theory leads you only to believe without observing for yourself, stop. Test it yourself. Look deeply within and do not hastily accept anything, not even what is spoken by those you respect most. Truth does not lie in words. It can only be realized in your own awakening. There is a common misunderstanding that most people fall into. They assume knowledge and wisdom are the same. They think that someone who reads many books, has broad understanding, and can debate philosophical or scientific issues is truly wise. But this is not the case. Knowledge can be learned, copied from others, memorized, and used as a tool. Wisdom, however, is entirely different. It cannot be taught, it cannot be copied, and it cannot be attained merely by reading or listening. Wisdom is not something to accumulate, it is a state of awareness. Someone may read hundreds of books on meditation, know every theory of enlightenment, and explain clearly the nature of no self or the absence of absolute truth, yet when faced with loss or suffering, they still react like everyone else. Fear, attachment, anger. Their knowledge cannot free them because it is borrowed from outside. They know about enlightenment but do not live in it. This is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is information. Wisdom is a profound understanding from within. One may learn about the impermanence of the world, but only when they truly witness everything dissolving before their eyes, when a loved one departs, when fame fades, when the beliefs they once held collapse, do they actually understand impermanence? That understanding no longer remains a concept, but becomes a living awareness, an undeniable truth. That is wisdom. One can read about love and hear poems that praise it, but unless they have loved themselves, all they know remains theory. They may describe love in flowery language, but they do not truly understand it. Likewise, one can speak eloquently about enlightenment, but if they have never experienced a moment of awakened awareness themselves, what they say remains merely a repetition of others. So how does one develop wisdom rather than merely accumulate knowledge? Experience rather than only read. Observe rather than only analyze. Live with reality rather than try to define it. If you wish to understand the silence of enlightened ones, do not merely read about it. Practice silence yourself. If you wish to understand meditation, do not only learn theory. Sit down and feel the present moment. If you wish to understand impermanence, do not only listen to others speak of it. Look directly at the changes unfolding in your own life. Knowledge may be forgotten, but wisdom cannot. When someone truly understands something with their whole being, that understanding becomes part of them, inseparable. This is why masters do not teach like professors but guide learners to their own experience. Only when you see for yourself and understand for yourself does wisdom truly arise. Not all enlightened ones choose silence or teach only a few. Some have tried to spread truth widely, but what happened? When a truth is taught too much, it gradually becomes corrupted. What was originally pure and illuminating is distorted, oversimplified, even exploited for purposes it never intended. When Buddhism was in its original form, it was not a religion with temple systems, complex rituals, or rigid doctrines. The Buddhists simply pointed out the path for individuals to liberate themselves from suffering. But as the teaching spread, it lost its original character. It became an institution, a system, something to be learned, taught, yet no longer a personal journey of discovery. People began to argue over which teachings were correct and which were not, who had the authority to teach and who did not. From a path of liberation, it became a network of rules, beliefs, and hierarchies, causing many followers to miss the true spirit of the practice. The same happened with Taoism. Originally, Laozi did not intend to create a religion. He left behind the Tao Te Ching, a text of profound insights into the workings of the cosmos and how humans might align with the Tao. Yet as those ideas spread, they were divided into sects with rituals, magic, and even exploited for profit. Truth ceased to be something to experience directly and instead became a belief system. Once something becomes a belief, it is no longer a living truth. Western philosophy did not escape this fate either. Socrates emphasized, "I know that I know nothing," because he understood that true wisdom does not lie in ready-made answers but in continual self-inquiry. Yet later philosophy became systems of theory in which people debate who is right or wrong rather than use philosophy as a tool for self-understanding. When an idea becomes a system, it is no longer a means of awakening but a framework in which people get trapped. Why does this happen? Because humans tend to turn everything into a system they can control. We dislike ambiguity and things we cannot grasp. So when we encounter vast truth, we try to confine it with words, rules, and dogma. Yet once truth is confined, it is no longer truth. It becomes a distorted version, a shadow of its original reality. Looking back at history, we see that the greatest truths were often not written in books or widely proclaimed, but passed from teacher to disciple for those with the right affinity. Masters understood that overteaching could destroy the very truth they sought to preserve. Once truth is repeated too often, it is no longer something to experience but a doctrine to believe. When people believe without experiencing, they lose access to reality itself. Therefore, sincere seekers of wisdom should not cling to existing systems or believe blindly in teachings. They should question, experience, and explore for themselves because wisdom does not lie in words repeated 1,000 times, but in each person's direct realization. That is why masters do not rush to teach everyone. They know that only those who are truly ready will keep the truth alive instead of turning it into a lifeless relic of ancient teachings. Great masters teach not with words, but with nonverbal methods that force students to experience for themselves. Their teaching does not rely on theory, but on direct experience in which truth can be realized without conceptual thought. One of the most important methods is mindfulness meditation. When a meditation teacher instructs a student, they do not offer elaborate theory or step-by-step lectures. They simply ask the student to sit and observe. No lengthy discourse, no complex philosophical system, just one simple action: observe one's own mind. In that simplicity, the student truly confronts their own nature. Without words to cling to, without anyone guiding every step, they must look deeply within, and it is in that stillness that truth begins to reveal itself. Another paradoxical yet powerful method is the koan. A koan is an illogical or nonsensical question designed to break through a student's rational mind. For example, if a student asks, "What is enlightenment?" the teacher might reply, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" That question cannot be answered by ordinary logic, causing the student's mind to tumble into confusion. They cannot use intellect to solve it, and if they try, they will never find an answer. But if they let go of dualistic thought and directly experience the moment without analysis, they will see that the answer lies not in words, but in the moment of pure awareness. Another way enlightened ones convey wisdom is through energy transmission by presence. In many spiritual traditions, it is believed that a truly awakened being need not speak. Their presence alone radiates energy that influences those sensitive enough to receive it. This is not mysticism or magic, but the resonance of a consciousness at a high frequency affecting those ready to receive. However, not everyone has the opportunity to meet an enlightened being in this world. Those who have reached the state of absolute wisdom are as rare as a drop of water in the ocean. Therefore, rather than seek an enlightened companion, turn inward. Observe your mind, cultivate stillness, and refine your awareness so you can connect to the highest state of wisdom without needing anyone's guidance. All these methods share one thing. They do not teach anything new but compel you to see what is already there. No new knowledge is added, no beliefs are imposed, because truth cannot be given. It can only be realized by the experiencer. If wisdom cannot be conveyed in words and enlightenment cannot be described in language, then why do I make so many videos to talk about these things? If truth does not lie in knowledge but can only be realized through personal experience, why does the Philosophy of Heart channel have an entire playlist of lectures, analyses, and explanations on every aspect of awareness, mind, and philosophy? I do not share this content so that you can accumulate more knowledge, but to help you remove the layers of thought that have obscured the wisdom already within you. If you have ever watched the videos in the Gateway to the Mind playlist, you will see that I do not try to present a fixed doctrine or assert an absolute truth, but instead pose questions, break old beliefs, and open new perspectives. Each video is not an answer, but a doorway for you to look more deeply into your own mind. However, knowledge without practice remains only knowledge. That is why I created the Mindfulness Practice playlist, where you can not only listen and understand, but also directly experience what I am talking about. Exercises for observing the mind, guided mindfulness practices, methods for seeing reality without distortion by thought, and ways to master your inner energy. None of this is meant for you to memorize, but for you to practice, to verify for yourself, to realize for yourself. Each person is in a different state of awareness. Each has a unique journey, and no one can walk another's path. That is why I do not focus on a single aspect, but explore many perspectives, from cognitive science to Buddhism, from Eastern philosophy to modern psychology, from the workings of the mind to the traps of thought. I make many videos not to create a tight theoretical system, but to offer you multiple approaches so that you can find what suits you best. Some come to Mind Podcast through philosophy, some through Buddhism, others through scientific analysis, but all those paths lead to one thing: your own awakening. I could choose to make simpler, more trendy videos, or replicate content to gain more views. But I do not choose that path. I choose this content because I know there are those who are genuinely seeking. Mind Podcast is not a place that hands out the truth, but a place that helps you see the truth that has always been there. At present, many channels copy Mind Podcast content without clear purpose. Some deliberately use similar names to confuse viewers. This not only undermines the originality of my sharing, but also distorts the true meaning of the content. When material is edited, taken out of context, or used for other purposes, its original spirit gradually disappears and misleads the audience. I do not claim to be an enlightened master, nor do I see myself as a teacher. I simply share what I find valuable. For every video on Mind Podcast, you need neither hastily believe nor reject. Just observe for yourself, experience for yourself, and then you will find your own answers. I wish you and your loved ones abundant health, peace, and wisdom.